The realm of subculture as the expanding meaning of subculture as a continuation concept has been presented with an amount of various magazines like catalog. At the same time, we saw editors and writers as pioneers. Of the realm of subculture in this featured article suggests that this realm of subculture is not depending on cultural commodities themselves, but a matter of way connecting these commodities with a particular style. This representation of the term subculture in 19th has relevance to the transformation of Japanese youth subculture mentioned by code number from Zok to K, that shifting from subculture based on face-to-face situation on coexisting to subculture as nexus based on access to wave of bodies and goods represented by media. Paradoxically speaking, the term subculture, such as the label for wave of bodies and goods represented by media, has been recognized as the established genre through 90s. Masataka Kondo, writer on subculture, states, through 90s, the term subculture has penetrated into the popular with its appropriation, subculture. In consequence, the subculture corner are offered in many bookshops. Since the emergence of these subculture, which primarily characterized by not depending on any genre, has been recognized as a certain genre. Similarly, in the featured article of Super, Akio Nakamori states his frustration that the focus of subculture or subculture has shifted to only items or goods and ignores the relations and cultures underlying these items. In 90s, subculture has been ready-made genre on mass media. Meanwhile, some example of usage of subculture presents that this genre is very arbitrary category involving miscellaneous cultural commodities. Thus, it is important to examine a particular strategy of appropriating the term subculture or subculture and in its context, rather than to explore what subculture is. I will refer to two texts in order to examine the quotidian concept of subculture in a particular subcultural context, called manga culture. One is a discussion titled Ito, Otaku, Subculture, with three manga critics, Kentaro Takekuma, Go-Ito, and Kaichiro Horikawa in 2007. Another is a featured article titled Otaku vs. Subculture in the monthly cultural magazine Eureka. In these texts on otaku and subculture, both of them adopt the same standpoint that the term subculture has been employed for labeling subcultural other in the hand of otaku. In formal discussion, Morikawa said that term subculture itself is a word invented by otaku in order to distinguish them from us, and points out that this is a part of symbolic struggle on differentiation or distinction among youth subcultures since the 80s. Furthermore, in same discussion, Takeguma points out that otaku has community-oriented character and needs the others, such as subculture, in order to sustain the solidarity and borders of otaku groups. On the other hand, Takeguma mentioned that otaku and subculture are primarily same-use subcultures. In the featured article of Eureka, the conflict between otaku and subculture is just a matter of self-identity of otaku. In this featured article of Eureka, the matter presented as otaku versus subculture is regarded as fiction to expose its fictionality. This attitude of the featured article, however, supports that this fiction, otaku versus subculture, has been accepted among the members of manga culture or like otaku. As this presentation roughly mentioned, in 70s to 90s Japan, the term subculture has been transformed the representation of imagery based on a particular lifestyle and consuming activity of cultural commodities displayed in magazines for young people. This transformation, or that is, appropriation of subculture, has become subculture as established genre as ironic consequence. Subculture as consequence of this appropriation of the term subculture, however, has been the appropriation in manga culture, or to be precise, otaku culture as subculture of manga culture, in order to construct and label others to exclude rather than symbolic resource to construct desired self-image as Bennett mentioned. In other words, the term subculture has been exploited for negative symbolic resources of strategy of self-identification. Subculture itself is very arbitrary category, thereby it has been situational symbolic indicator of other or different in the appropriation of culture. Last paragraph. As I mentioned, Bennett points out that the increasingly apparent disjuncture between subculture's conventional sociological significance as an abstract theoretical model and its use in everyday vernacular context. In contrast, this disjuncture between conventional sociological significance of subculture and its use in everyday vernacular context often has been ignored or garbed with the rise of cool Japan or grand nationalism. For instance, such discourses on subculture derived from academic conferences or articles are disseminated and appropriated by mass media and reappropriated to construct representation of subculture as homogeneous domestic national culture or exploited popular culture in the hand of members of subculture themselves. Just to critically examine reflexive cultural politics on the term of subculture as sociological or quotidian concept is important task for subculture studies or manga studies. Thank you for